I'd like to know, yes, when you started
Yeah.
playing the violin.
I was first introduced to the violin when I was 3 years old by my grandmother. She was a violinist herself who quit the violin when she got married. But she kept her violin from when she was younger, and she introduced me to what the violin was when I was 3 years old. That was kind of my very first introduction, but then I didn't start actually playing the violin until I was 9 years old, when I actually requested to my parents music lessons. So my parents, not being musicians, they never really forced me into it. So they never pushed me to actually start learning music. So they kind of waited for me to say, okay, I want to do this. That happened at 9 years old, and then I had my very first violin lesson, and it was like love at first sight. I fell in love with the feeling of having the violin against my neck. Um, Despite, I don't know, I felt like that first sound I made, just so there was something magical about it, which is, I guess, strange, because the first sound you make on the violin is usually quite horrible to hear. Like, it's not an easy instrument to start playing. But I don't know, something happened, and I decided so quickly then that I wanted to make it my profession. Obviously, when you decide a job at 9, 10 years old, you don't realize everything that it comes with. But it was my dream. It was my goal. I've never had a plan B since. It was always what I wanted to do. So that's how I started, and then it kind of went along a very, very eventful journey, to be honest.
You say your parents are not musicians. Do you come from a musical family? How did you, where did your love of music come from?
Once I said, my grandmother used to play the violin, but I've never, because she quit before I was born, I never actually saw her play. My parents are music love, and they love listening to music, but I don't come from a family of musicians.
But you were in a musical environment when you say your parents listened to music. That was something you were intimate with, listening to
They
music.
listen to music, but I wouldn't say I was, like in a particularly like classical music environment or anything. They listen to music like anybody would listen to music, I guess. It's some music around the house, and they enjoy the music and stuff. But I don't think that's what it. I don't know. I don't think that's what really brought me to start playing the violin. I think sometimes when you're a kid, like, people show things to you, and sometimes you don't click straight away. Like, for example, 3 years old is very, very young, but it really stayed somewhere in my head. And when I was a bit older, I was like, oh, shit, I want to do this. So.
I see. And so then you moved from France to England, which I was going to ask,
Yeah.
why did you move to the UK?
So I went to study at the Conservatoire, the Aix-en-Provence Conservatoire, when I was
Okay.
10, and I graduated from there quite quickly. As I said, because I was so focused on the goal of actually making it my profession, I worked extremely hard, and I I kind of passed all the exams quite quickly. And at 14 years old, I was graduating from the Conservatoire, and we were looking for somewhere where I could study music and school
Yeah.
together, which is very hard to find. In France, it doesn't exist. School is very intense in France, the timings. So you start at 8 a.m., you finish at 5 p.m., and usually you have 2 hours of homework. So it was impossible to add to that, 4 hours of violin, which is what, people want to do. They want to make it the profession we're doing. So we heard about some music schools in the UK, where there was the mix of the two. So you had like a school together within the same building with high, kind of high level music lessons. And it seemed to be the perfect thing, also to be surrounded by other kids who want to do the same thing as you, who have the same passion. Because that was quite difficult, actually, in my start of my teenage years in France, when I was kind of the only one at school having this passion and having this focus. I was quite isolated. Actually, I started school and then I went into homeschooling because I didn't manage to do both. So it just wasn't the ideal thing. Like I was missing the social aspect of life, and that's why we thought of going abroad. So I auditioned and I got in, and so my parents stayed in Aix and I left by myself to come to the UK.
That's interesting. I didn't know. So do you think kids in France would be at a disadvantage if they're absolutely driven to become musicians?
It's a little bit, it's a shame that there's no schools like that. It feels like I know quite a few people who've made a choice quite early on in terms of focusing on the violin, on the instrument, and not school. But that wasn't really an option even for my parents or even for me, to be honest. I loved many subjects at school, and it wasn't a decision I wanted to make, to think, okay, I'll kind of give up school and just focus on music. It just wasn't the right thing. So I mean, you know, people always find solutions. There's homeschooling, you can just say, okay, forget it, and I just focus on the music. But there's not that ideal solution of having schools like that. And I think the UK is really, really great place for that, to have the possibility for kids to be, you know, like you have it in other things, like in sports. I feel like this it's kind of sometimes a little bit better made, but for music and the arts, sometimes it's a bit behind. But the UK seems to be doing well with that.
I see. I did not know that. And so you progressed quite quickly. What are your sort of career highlights so far? What are you most proud of up to now?
I think, well, there's a few things that I kind of become really proud of. I guess signing my first album with Sony was like a big achievement for me. Giving my solo debut at the Royal Albert Hall, that was that was a highlight. Things that I kind of always dreamed of doing, but you know, like when we talk about Royal Albert Hall, I studied at the Royal College of Music, so I was walking in front of the Royal Albert Hall every morning to go and practice, and I used to say to myself, you know, maybe one day, maybe one day, and I don't think I even believed it for me myself, to be honest, when I said this. Like, it was more of a dream than a goal. So when I had the opportunity to do this and to play with you know, soloist with an orchestra and give a debut there like that, it was really, really dream come true, and it felt like there was a real sense of accomplishment, and I guess just like a realization of everything that you've worked so hard for all these years. I think music, and I mean a lot of artistic subjects, but sports as well, you start working hard from a very young age, and I think that's what's quite hard sometimes, is that, you know, you're 14, 15, all your friends are going out and going to parties, and you're there and practicing, and you have to say, actually, sorry, no, I can't go, and I've got to work. What about tomorrow? Same thing about tomorrow. You know, it's, you know, summer holidays, you know, I don't remember ever taking just 2 months off doing nothing. You know, it was always work, and I don't regret it whatsoever. It was always my choice, but I think that's what can be quite hard. So when you have these moments where you feel like you really have the realization that you've accomplished something, and that all of this work has really led up to something, it feels nice for you, and also for all the people who have put in a lot of effort for you. I mean, my parents have sacrificed a lot financially, you know, to be able to help me pay, you know, my violin lessons. You know, they gave everything they had, so, you know, it feels nice to be able to now give back to them and show them that, you know, it was worth it, and, you know, thank you for believing in me.
Tell me about your album. I assume you can get it on CD and you can
Yes.
download it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell me about it. What did you put into it? What do you think is interesting about it?
So it's a very, very first album. So it's a little bit of a nerve-wracking process, to be honest, you know, to have that kind of first album out. I think the one thing for me is also because I'm very active on social media. And so I have I think, a very particular audience compared to other classical musicians. And I have some people who might be the more typical classical music audience who might have listened to me on radio or stuff. But there's also a lot of people who will follow me on TikTok, who will have heard me and saw a video of me on social media and stuff. So I wanted to try and find something that kind of fits everyone, fits me, of course, but also fits everyone. So for that first album, I really had a mix of different types of pieces. There's, kind of cool classical music, and for that I chose female composers, which is something I'm very keen about and bringing. So I had some Amy Beach, some Clara Schumann. And I did some new collaborations as well with living composers like Rachel Portman, who's somebody I admire a lot. I took back some very famous melodies and themes from the classical music, like Tchaikovsky, the song from Tchaikovsky, like Satie, Gymnopédie, so things like that, and made a new arrangement around it, brought it a new twist. And there was some new music as well. I did quite a few collaborations with new artists, which I really love doing. Generally, a little bit in classical music style as well as other styles. I've kept it classical for the album, but generally, I love experimenting with doing collaborations and even sometimes composing a little bit myself within it. So it's a real mix, and I think that was what was nice about it is being able to reach hopefully have reached and made happy all the people who follow me, and that was the first thing that they really heard of me. So I wanted to.
I'll get to your social media presence in a minute. I was just going to ask: are you working on another album? Is composition something you want to do more of?
Yeah, composition is definitely something I want to do more of. The second album I'm working on, and actually it's quite soon going to be start talking about it. So the composition process couldn't really be happening in that next album. I don't want to spoil it, but however, what I have also started really doing is new arrangements, and have kind of the freedom of taking a melody and arrange things around it. But I want to try and push myself with the composition thing. It's something I've always wanted to do. But I feel like as classical musicians, we work so hard on improving our technique on the instrument that, we have this also big kind of division of composers, performers, and nobody's really mixing with it. You're either a composer or a performer, and I think that's a shame. Like we could do both, and but it's not something that's encouraged at all in music college or something. So, but I get more and more people asking, for original compositions. So definitely want to do that.
And are you interested in collaborating with people outside of the classical world? Is that something specifically you're aiming to do?
Yeah, I think there's so much you can gain from that. Maybe on an intellectual level, like musical level, and as well on being able to reach different audiences. Like, like I've done something with like a jazz trumpet player, like electronic artists, like film composers, pop singers. It's just there's so much you can bring to each other, and with classical music as well, it can help taking off kind of all these preconceived ideas about it. Sometimes being able to take it and put it in a place where people don't expect it, bring it to an audience. Like I did a tour a few months ago with an electronic artist, and to have like a violin solo, for example, within the middle of the concert, with people literally standing up and screaming, and to bring in that there, like it's new, but you can actually do so much by doing so. And I don't think, it's great to have it on its own, to have it as it is, but like I think we don't realize the power that the right collaboration can have on the genre that we want to expand, that is for now not listened to as much as many other when it has a potential to.
Do you listen to jazz and pop outside for pleasure?
I do absolutely.
Anyone you like? Anyone you like to mention?
I mean, to be honest, there's a real mix. Like I do love jazz. But I guess all the many jazz violinists that I love, maybe Stefan Grappelli or Didier Lockwood, or and I love the freedom that you can have, and that they have in improvisation, which I found sometimes lacking in just. And it's not like it, because obviously there's so much to it when you perform a piece and you have to understand what the composer means, but you use a certain part of your brain to do that. And I've often felt like there was a whole other side of my brain that I wasn't using, that I was really missing, and that was that freedom and that idea of you go on stage and you have all this technique that you've worked so hard for. You have all these notes, all this rhythm, and you can do whatever you want with it. I mean, yes, you have obviously tonalities and chords, but within that, the freedom is huge. And it's such a different feeling that coming on stage and being so focused on the notes that you have to play, and you can't make a wrong note and all of that. So, and it's super powerful as well. It's very different. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I think it's a shame that we don't develop both parts.
I mean, you mentioned Grappelli. Is it very difficult going from a classical background? Is it very difficult to learn to improvise? Do you find it particularly difficult?
It's like you've got to. What's difficult is to get out of your comfort zone, basically. When you've been taught for so many years to just read the music that's in front of you, to take off that kind of like, it literally feels like you have to take off kind of all the shames that you might have, and just try it. Just try and be happy to fail, and be happy to go to something that you don't know. There's something that is a bit scary. I had a really great experience where I was asked to join on stage the trumpet player Ibrahim Malouf, and it was literally one day before they asked me, and it was in front of thousands of people, and I had to make an improvisation, and I was so nervous, but it was like such a great experience, because it really had this effect of, okay, well, I don't have a choice. Like, I have to just jump in there and go for it. So it's not that easy, but we're capable of doing it. Like, we've built this technique as classical musicians, which means that we're literally able to play any styles of music. Like we able, with a bit of work, to adapt really to any kind of style. But we have to take up that fear of it's literally a different part of the brain that is being used. I mean, it's thinking outside the box, thinking of a different rhythm, thinking of a different type of notes going around, and using that creativity. So I think it's doable. It's definitely doable, but it's not that easy when you've been taught the complete opposite for years. But that's why it's great to collaborate with other musicians, because they show you the way, and you each bring something to each other in a way.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to have to move from topic to topic relatively quickly. There's a lot to talk to you about, but we've got a limited time. So you're doing your podcast, Women in Classical.
Yeah.
Feel free to plug that, because I want to know why you started doing it, and what in particular do you think are the difficulties which face women who choose to have a career in classical music?
Yeah, I started it because I realized how much and how many subjects were taboo in the classical music industry regarding challenges that women face, as well as just generally a lack of communication and of a feel of community together. There's something that I mentioned quite a lot, and that I felt very strongly, is that as women, we often put in competition with each other. We often being compared on things that have sometimes nothing to do with the music, a lot with the physical appearance, the way we dress, etc. And I've often felt like, okay, there's another woman violinist, or she's competition. I must, not talk to her, and we fight because we're basically the same. And there's one spot for a woman violinist, and I must have this, And I realized, like quite recently, actually, how much more powerful it can be to actually support each other and have a feel of community. And I realized that the more I was talking to different women across the industry, and the subjects that we were able to talk about during this podcast have felt really liberating. And the feedback that I've had as well from musicians. And what I'm trying to do is to not only have performers, but to have composers, to have, I want to have producers, I want to have, kind of across different genres of the music. What they've said is it's nice to have a place to talk about these things. It's nice to be listened to. It's nice to not just say, okay, yeah, all right. It's important to talk about this thing. I think it's important as well for younger people going into the industry to feel like, these things are important. There's so many things that I've experienced when I was younger that were accepted and that are accepted and that are so not acceptable. And I realize it now, but yet back then I just shut up and
Can you be more specific? Do you have anything specific in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think comments that were made by professors, by even other colleagues, literally comments on I had a teacher saying to me that I'm like a Barbie doll because I have, I look pretty and I have no brain. Things that...
Is that a male teacher?
Yeah. And I don't want to put, it's not blaming them. I don't want to be putting names out there or anything, but the reality of things is that this kind of comment was seen as normal, like nobody was shocked by this comment. But yet you say that to a 14-year-old girl. And I remember that today, over 10 years later. And the impact that this can have is huge. The fact that, when I talk to, as I said, really very different type of women who've all had different experience, but who yet have all had something to say about, the fact that, for example, you're going as a soloist, and a lot of the time, the conductor is going to be an older man, and some of the leaders of the orchestra as well, and it's hard to feel listened to. It's hard to feel, and you sometimes, and things are changing, and obviously I want to keep things positive, and the whole point of the podcast is, we talk about challenges, but we talk about, advice for young girls as well, and try also to keep it positive too, but what inspires them, etc. But the truth is, a lot of things that have been happening, that are happening, were for so long just ignored and seen as normal. And it's by talking about it that it's the first step. I think it's just talking about it, actually making these things heard, and having a place where there's time and people are listening, and you're not going to be told that, okay, nobody cares. These things are valuable and important, and yet there's still a lot of, again, if you want to be more specific, the amount of times that still you are being told that you are where you are not because of your hard work, or but because of your looks, or what you might have, the way you might have acted. Like, this is, these are still comments that are going out there and that are being accepted. That comments that I got when I was in school. So yeah, it's just, I'm I guess passionate about this because I've suffered from it, but I know many other. I think nearly all women have suffered from this, and I want to try and make positive impact with what I've experienced. Yeah.
Do you feel this is changing?
Yeah, I
You
think
can
it's
see it changing.
I do, and I think that's why I'm positive. I don't want to, I'm not, I'm a positive person generally anyway, but I do because I realize that now some of the things that I was told when that was 10 years ago, they're not accepted anymore. They're not being accepted anymore, and that's wonderful. But that's because we teach girls now that these things are not acceptable, that these things are not okay, and that's good. And this is, this is the way we should live. But it's by talking about it, by being open about it, that we can, that we can realize this. But it's great. It's wonderful to see as well different types of women opening up about these things. It's been really, really inspiring for me to talk to all these women about it, and it can range from so many different subjects. And everybody has a very different experience. Everybody has been marked or by different things in life, and that's why it's so interesting, I find.
So what's your advice to younger girls, younger women who are entering the classical world? And what are your warnings? What should they be looking at? What should they expect in terms of the perils?
I mean, there's always a lot, but I think one thing personally is what I think is one of the hardest things is dealing with judgment, and especially judgment and comparing yourself. And we're in a world where social media has such an important, and I'm pro social media. Like, I think there's so many great things about social media, but I know the bad sides as well. And young, like, teenagers and kids now are growing up with social media and with this constant they're going to constantly be comparing themselves with what they see online, and that's a very hard thing. And as well as maybe always having judgment, because of course when you put yourself out there, you are going to have people judging you, and you're going to have people having an opinion about you. And if you're transparent and nobody cares and you don't disturb anyone, you might not. But as from the moment that you're really going to want to be yourself, you're really going to try and do something new, something that you believe in, people are going to have an opinion. People are going to say something. And having the confidence to ignore this, to listen to the people who you care about, to be open enough to actually listen to advice, but to still have the confidence and the grit to just keep going where you want to go, no matter what people will say, no matter what people will, see you as. And that's also one thing, is to not be influenced by the way people see you and think that you should do. Because if that had been the case, if I actually did follow what teachers that I had thought that I could do, I would have given up music. So, it's hard, because sometimes you're gonna, you want to see your reflection in somebody else's, so especially if it's a professor or something, you're gonna think, well, if they see me like this, if this school, for example, or I'm there, I've got this grade, I'm nearly the last behind, in terms of level, looking at the notes that we have, for example, the percentage at the end of the exam, I'm the last, you're gonna have this image of you, but it's just something else in the real world. Like, that's nothing to do with it. So I think it would be to follow what you want to do, and stop caring so much about what people say around you. But it sounds very easy when you say it. It's very hard to do it.
Absolutely. You've used social media very successfully as a classical musician. How did you get into it? What was your initial aim? Were you just trying to make classical music more accessible to others, or?
Came from like a personal struggle of feeling really lonely, and a feel of like I wasn't satisfied with the idea of just spending all these hours practicing, and yet when I was playing, there was just very few people listening to what I was doing, and a very like specific type of people. And I also didn't enjoy the rules that there was around it about how it had to be presented. I thought a lot could be done differently, but you can't. There's things I couldn't change in in institutions and stuff, but I realized that social media was a way, like a blank page for me to express the things the way I wanted, and it worked. So yeah.
You think it does make classical music more accessible to a wider audience? Is that something you think is happening?
Absolutely. I mean, there's been actually proper studies being done saying, how much TikTok, for example, has done to make classical music more accessible. There's proven studies that kids today are listening more to classical music than their parents, for example. So it's the case. It's definitely the case. Like when you have it out there, you have it, in funny format, you have it. It works. It is, and it's definitely my goal. I want classical music to be listened by young people like they listen to any other style of music.
And you've got to have quite a thick skin, right? I mean, you were talking about judgments and comments and so on. That must be hugely amplified on social media. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it definitely is, social media, especially because, people don't have to say it to your face. It's very easy to leave a nasty comment, to leave, and I guess I learned it the hard way. I remember especially at the beginning, because it was really new what I was doing, and there was hardly anybody on social media when I started. So, I had a lot of judgment and people saying very nasty things, and I remember having a time where I really questioned it. Am I doing this the right thing? Like, is this even worth it? But at the end of the day, I had to be honest, I had nothing to lose, and it really made me happy to do this. And I think that's nowadays a lot of musicians go on social media because they kind of have to, and we tell them that is the right thing to do, and labels tell you that it's the right thing to do to have an audience and all of that. But I actually love creating content. I love filming, making funny videos, making vlogs. Like, I enjoyed it. And I thought, at the end of the day, what's the point? Like, what's the point of trying to live so that you don't get judgment? You don't need, you just like try and not walk on something and you're not going to be feeling comfortable. And these people are not going to like you more because if you stop doing it, like, it's not okay. I stopped doing it now. They're gonna like me. Like, that's not how it works. So I thought, well, bye bye, and just kept going.
But you appreciate it might be quite difficult for a lot of other girls who want to be in classical music, who want to be present on social media. They might find it a lot harder to deal with those sorts of pressures.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah, it's hard. But I think it's. To be honest, firstly, I'm not saying that it's for everyone. I think everyone should do what they believe in, and that's not saying everybody should be on social media and trying it that way. There's many different ways of doing it, and even within social media, you can find your own style. You can find the platform that's right for you. You can find the way it's right for you to share videos or photos or whatever. Like, you don't have to stick to something. You don't have to copy or to try and be someone else. Like, you can try and bring in whatever you want to bring. And that's often less hard in a way. Like, even if you get judgment, if you do something that you really believe in, that's really you, at the end of the day, it's less hard because you know why you do it. Deep inside you, there's that thing that's going to keep driving you to it. If you do something that you don't really want to do, after a few judgment, after a few hard moments, you're going to give up because it wasn't in there. It wasn't, you didn't have this drive that was saying, okay, get up. It's all right. Get up. It's going to be okay.
So as a musician, where do you want to be in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time? Where do you want to be, or where do you see yourself going?
I mean, I have many things that I want to accomplish, but I guess like in broader way, like as I said before, like my goal would be to actually bring classical music to a place where you'd have you'd have people who would come to the concerts who are not your typical classical music concert goers. I think there's something that's great that's happening now, which is people on social media are listening to classical music. People on Spotify and on social streaming platforms are starting to listen to more classical music. But I don't think we yet have this conversion of people actually going to concerts yet fully, and that's kind of my broader goal. And I'd love to have that actually properly done. So I guess that's my broader goal. But then, you know, after that, of course, there's many things like, you know, like a beautiful concert hall that I want to be playing in, and orchestras and conductors to collaborate with, as well as other artists that I'd like to, you know, I'd love to collaborate with in other fields. I'd love to try and to try to have a career that doesn't, I guess one thing as well that I really want, and I'm doing now already, but is not to have just one side of things. Like, I don't want to be just playing concerts, for example. I love doing my podcast, I love presenting, I love social media, I'm a lot into fashion as well, and trying to bring all of that together and trying to show that it's not because you're a classical musician that you have to be stuck into that one thing and not doing anything. And that's quite hard, again, because as soon as you jump out of something that's not purely classical, sometimes people are going to say, okay, you're out. And to show that it's possible, that you can play in a concert that is not classical and still be a good classical musician, and it doesn't take anything out of you, and you shouldn't be less respected because you play pop music. You know, you've had a classical training, and actually it shows a lot of, you know, open-mindedness to be able to do other styles.
Okay, and just to finish off, I want to know what we should expect from you in your projects, current projects, or any time in the near future in terms of output, performances.
So I've just become the artist in residence of the English Symphony Orchestra, and so there's a lot of projects coming up with them. It's going to be very exciting new partnership, you know, with the idea of doing some performances in a bit of a new way, bringing some new works as well. I'm going to be doing some work with the ESO, but also with the ESO Youth Orchestra. I love education. I love connecting with younger people, teenagers especially. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of what I'm going to be doing this year. And then my album #2 as well, coming out in September, but pre-orders will start next month actually. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for talking to the cast.
My pleasure, and I look forward to